Welcome back to Season 6 of the Interwoven podcast. In today's episode, I chat with Coral Slavin and Erica Karek. Coral was a birth professional for almost 30 years and is now a family life educator for new parents, helping everyone adjust after bringing home baby. Erica is a mom of 3, a family nurse practitioner, and certified life coach who works with individuals to discover personal and professional potential. And she especially enjoys grounding new parents in who they are and what's important in the midst of all that is parenting. We talk through how to keep our relationships strong by developing our language skills around personal health and getting back to the basics to establish our intimacy. This season, we are thrilled to share support with Kindbody Milwaukee. Dr. Ellen Hayes and her dedicated team are on a mission to transform fertility and family building care, making it more accessible, intuitive, and empowering for all. Thanks for being with us today. Enjoy the episode. Good morning. Hi, Coral. Hi, Erica.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm really excited to start the day with you guys. So for our audience, can you introduce yourselves and each give background information, and then we can talk about your work. So Coral, do you want to go first?
I'm Coral Slavin, and I have been a birth professional for almost 30 years. Only that came to an end about 5 years ago, and I had to make a career change. And now I am a family life educator and coach, as well as still doing a little bit of childbirth education.
I'm Erica Karek. I am neck deep in toddlerhood. I have a 4-year-old, a 2-year-old, and I'm cooking up my third. And I am a family nurse practitioner and certified life coach.
Yeah, Erica, can you talk about how did you move from being a nurse practitioner into your current coaching practice?
Yeah, so as a family nurse practitioner, I took care of people of all ages for acute and chronic conditions, from infancy through geriatrics. And there was a lot that I aligned with in that work, primarily building relationships with patients and their families and being their medical home. That was a part that I really loved. And there was, I think, a piece that was not as well aligned. And so I think primarily working for a large hospital system was tough. And so after I had my daughter, I kind of took a step back to kind of ask myself, what is it that really lights me up? What is the impact that I want to have? We spend so much of our lives working, right? We want to feel truly inspired by what we're doing. And so I have always been passionate about helping people to maximize their mental wellness. That led me to become a certified coach, to focus on helping parents, which is my, true passion, to ground themselves in who they are and what's important to them in the midst of all that is parenting. And so I have been really loving that work and feeling super fulfilled and aligned with that purpose. And I'm looking forward to pivoting a bit in this little business that I have to supporting women after or throughout pregnancy and then afterwards as they experience matrescence, which is truly never ending. So looking forward to incorporating my medical degree in that practice as well.
I'm very excited about that.
Same.
Coral, who was also my birth doula with my daughter. Can you tell us about your transition, how long you did birth work, and then at what point you started to have this feeling or that seed was planted that this needed to be your next step?
I did birth work for probably about 27 years, and that included doula work and childbirth education and support groups for parents, amongst other things. And I really felt passionate about working with those young families. But one of the things that I saw was that if you go out a few years, and research backs this up, after having a child, about 2/3 of couples just aren't satisfied anymore with their relationships, with the intimacy that they're experiencing. And that, of course, tends to lead to breakups. And what we're seeing today is more breakups than ever before, more transitions. So when it came time to make a career change, I just really wanted to focus on helping couples and families be healthier. And at first I thought about marriage and family counseling, but that's more after the fact. That's like closing the barn door after the cow is out, as they say. I didn't want to work with them when there was already such a huge problem that they're on the verge of separation or divorce. So family life coaching is more proactive. It's a way of helping couples and families that have decent relationships build better relationships. And that was really, I think, very inspiring to me, to be able to work with people just to make their life satisfaction better rather than waiting until they were in a crisis situation.
So I know this is a broad question, and it, it's going to depend on what each set of partners. But what does a session with you look like?
So it's a lot like life coaching. You work, I mean, there's coaching and there's education, and those are two different things. In education, I'm teaching classes, in particular, the Gottman 7 Principles of Successful Marriage or Relationships, and also Bringing Baby Home is a really great class. For couples to explore their relationship in terms of what's happening after a baby comes into the family life. So there's that educational piece, which I love doing. I'm really a big fan of the Gottman Institute and their research. Family life coaching is very much like life coaching. I think you're working with a couple or a family and helping them identify what areas they want to improve. Like, is it stress management? Is it communication skills? So you spend some time identifying the issue for them and then working on having them come up with the resolution that works for them, because everybody is different and every situation is different. Families today are more diverse than ever before. It used to be that the nuclear family was mom, dad, and children. And today it's single parents, divorced parents, cohabitating parents, grandparents, same-sex parents, etc. And so I don't think you can have one particular approach that works for all families. You have to deal with them individually. And I think that's where coaching really can be effective.
So I know from my personal experience and my work as a postpartum doula, I felt completely unprepared for what happened once my husband and I got home and we got to work learning how to be parents. And I also see that with a lot of the families that I go to support. Are there any basic guidelines that a family's expecting? Here are the things to consider as you prepare for that postpartum time together.
I think that we do a really good job of preparing people for childbirth. And then we have classes that help them with how to change diapers and how to put in the car seat, etc. But I don't think we do very well at helping couples to understand how dynamics are going to change once a baby comes. And so what you end up with often is division instead of teamwork. Once you add a child to the mix, you have greater demand on all your resources, your time, your money, your emotional state, etc. And so I think couples are not prepared for the extreme fatigue and just all the demands on them. And so instead of working together as a team, I think that's where the beginning of problems lie for them. They become competitive instead of, again, working together as a team. So I think talking about some of the issues ahead of time is helpful. Who's going to do what? How are we going to budget? What are our goals going into the future? What do we want things to look like 5 years from now and 10 years from now? Especially if you're hoping to also buy a house or change careers or anything like that. But the biggest thing I think is when they're in the situation with baby is just really communicating with each other their needs and problem solving. How are we going to do this together as a team?
So I think setting or rearranging expectations, and I'll even say like lowering them, which isn't a negative thing. It's just let's make things a little more realistic. I think that would be great to know ahead of time, and like setting up your ideas of what are your values for your family. But also, because I directly experienced it and I experienced it in my work, having the language as a new mom to express how I'm feeling so that it doesn't become a competition of who is more tired, who is doing more, why are we sleeping in separate beds? When things get really rough, that the mother has the language to explain that to her partner. So there is more understanding and compassion. Erica, in your work, is this something you see?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say too, I'll definitely touch upon that, but just in direct response is also it requires an incredible amount of bravery and vulnerability to first identify what's important to you, right? As the mother, as the partner, as the individual, and then to give yourself the permission to advocate for those needs. Because there is such a self-imposed stigma on needing anything in motherhood. And so doing some of that introspection, which is so intimate and so sometimes uncomfortable and vulnerable, but to ask ourselves, what is it that we want, need in this relationship, in this moment, and then taking that next step to ask your hopefully very trusted partner, knowing that we have no control over how they are going to react, feel, etc. And so I think that the work, Coral, that you're doing around helping people to prepare for this transition, there's so much, like you said, so much focus on like, okay, this is how, this is pregnancy, and this is how you take care of your body and your baby in pregnancy, and you're going to have to give birth, and this is how this is going to happen. And then afterwards, there's lots of focus on baby and lots of focus on all of that. And there is a lack of, there's a deficit in helping to prepare for how we manage, right, for ourselves and in our relationships. And so I think that having the conversations in advance, thinking about different roles and anticipating different struggles, right, there are with bringing home baby. Sometimes, do we want family to be around? Do we not want family to be around, right? What boundaries are we wanting to set for each other? And then also as a couple, right? As a nuclear family. And, what is truly important to each of us individually and together. And some of that too is hard to anticipate, right? I feel like so much of parenthood is like, we try to be prepared. We try to be in the know, and we can as much as we can, but there's no, you don't know until you know, and then there's no unknowing. Then you're in it. So I think there's this forging an alliance with your partner, like you were saying, and not, being committed to partnership and teamwork with the underlying understanding that we will navigate this together. Whatever transpires, the world is going to be turned upside down in some capacity. And I'm on your team, you're on my team. And from there, we'll move forward. Did that make sense?
It did.
I
It did.
laughed at that because it's so true. We don't know until we're in it what it's going to be. And so you can think ahead of time of what your needs might be, but you won't know until you're in it. And there's a lot of introspection that has to go on, and it's going to change day by day. But I think I agree that Theresa, what you said about expectations, I think that that's a critical piece to this, especially for women. We have always had the expectation of being the homemaker and the nurturer and all of that. And then women entered the workforce, and now we're supposed to be not only the mother who does everything perfectly, and now we're doing that, balancing it with work, but then you add to that social media, and women will look at what's on social media, and now not only am I supposed to be this and I'm supposed to be that, but I'm comparing myself to every other mother out there. So I think that we set ourselves up for a tremendous amount of stress, and that it does require, again, looking at your values, what's important to you, and minimizing, like you said, just lowering our expectations so that we aren't feeling just completely overwhelmed.
With expectations too is, maybe it's a different way to look at it, is not so much about lowering expectations, but about fine tuning our expectations, focusing on what is a non-negotiable expectation of myself. And I mean, I think there could be value for both of them at different times, but just another perspective that might be useful.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I would like to know, say you don't get to a couple beforehand, and they get home and they're a few months in and they realize, I have some resentment breeding here. This is starting to go in a negative direction and we need to course correct. What are some of the first things you ask of couples or have them think about or give them direction for?
I think that it's important in the initial contact with them that you get a feel for where their areas of conflict are, what their values are, so that you can kind of fine tune where to start to break down the most important issue to focus on. I don't think you can focus on everything all at once. And so it's just identifying the key areas that are causing the most strife for them. My background in grad school is in stress management. And so stress to me is the number one killer of relationships. And so what is it that's causing that resentment? What's causing the greatest amount of stress in the relationship? Identifying those issues, I think, is where I would start. Erica, I'm sure you're coming at it from about the same kind of perspective, but how would you answer that question?
Yeah. So sorry, Theresa, can you rephrase the questions just so that I can make sure I'm responding
Sure.
accurately?
Say you have a new family and the partners are now several months in.
Yeah.
And they're seeing that this is not going the way that they expected or they wanted.
First really like acknowledging the awareness that it took for them to recognize where they actually are, because I feel like that's it can be overlooked, right? How important it is to acknowledge where you are, even if it's not even close to where you want to be. Because if you don't know where you are, even if it's like in a terribly desolate place, there's no way to measure objectively where you're going. Identifying, like Coral said, like what values are shared, what are different, right? What is the perspective that each partner is holding? Giving them back the power to choose that perspective and helping to realign with what is important to them as a couple, what is important to them as parents, together and separate. Because even shedding light on values that are different can be hugely helpful in identifying tension points. Somebody might feel that their value is connection, and that's completely being squashed. It's no wonder when our values are squished that we feel out of balance. And so if we're not aware of each other's values or what's important to one another, then we can't begin to adjust accordingly.
I love that. So if a woman comes in solo and has a session with you, how do you guide her towards establishing that and finding her language around this experience?
A lot of times it's asking those very simple questions that we often don't allow ourselves the space to answer, such as, what is really important to you about this? What do you want? What do you need, right? As mothers and as partners, I find that it's common that we put ourselves lowest on the totem pole. And so, because we're not leaving, right? We're stuck with us. So, we can put our needs and wants and desires below all the others, but that leads to resentment. That leads to dysregulation. That leads to lots of things that are unintended consequences. Helping to first identify the answers to those simple but complicated questions. And then a lot of it sometimes is boundary setting, right? So and sometimes it's not even something to be said to the other person, but saying, I don't know if you're familiar with Dr. Becky Kennedy. I love her, but she's the author of Good Inside. And she talks about boundaries as being as related to children, but it's applicable as things that only we control. Oftentimes boundaries are misinterpreted as a request. So, saying, please don't, whatever, that places the control completely with the other person. They can choose at that time whether or not to respect your request. Whereas a boundary is saying, I won't let you X. So helping to brainstorm some boundaries within the individual woman to say, I won't let you make me second guess myself. I won't let you steal my joy. I won't let you, etc. So that they have the clear vision for themselves on what's non-negotiable to them. And then it's a practice. It's like going to the gym. All of this work is cumulative. I think another thing that is a barrier is the expectation that when we address something that's challenging, that we're checking a box, that we're saying, okay, I'm addressing this, I'm going to think about this, and then I'm going to move on. But it's the constant addressing, the going to the gym to keep working out this muscle that's not so comfortable, and it's not something that we're so practiced at until we continue to practice.
It's not an overnight thing. It is, you're right, it's working a muscle. It does take practice. Coral, boundaries. When couples come to you, how do you help them navigate that conversation together about discovering and establishing their boundaries?
I don't know that I focus as much on boundaries. When I'm working with a couple, that there are always going to be problems or issues that need to be resolved. And we know that probably 2/3 are things that have no absolute solution. It's always like you say, Erica, it's just keep working at it, just keep trying to make it better because we have different values. And so I don't know that I focus on boundaries as much as really before you can actually get to a point where you can focus on those issues, you got to work on the relationship. And once a baby comes, too often we focus all of our attention on the baby and then on our children. And so much of our energy goes into them, and the relationship just sort of, it flounders. And I think that what we're doing is the opposite approach, and that is we need to focus on the relationship first. And so, in order for a couple to really be able to focus on those big issues in their relationship, they need to rediscover each other and take a step back and remember why it is that you got together in the first place. And it's sort of like looking at the glass half full. We tend to start, again, we're focused on all these things we're supposed to be. So we start looking at our partner thinking, well, he or she doesn't do this and he or she does that. And we're looking at the negative instead of just really going back to looking at what's the positive, what are the good things that we have in this relationship, and reestablishing that friendship, rekindling the romance of the relationship, the intimacy. To me, that's the primary thing we should begin with, and then we'll focus on figuring out who's going to do what, or how are we going to spend the money, or how are we going to make these bigger decisions. But too often, if we start off just really focused on the negative, we're going to just push them towards separating. Like, screw it, I'll just get out of this relationship and go to something else. And then we're just going to have a different set of problems in the next relationship.
And we'll be right back. Are you looking to build your family, or would you like to better understand your fertility potential for when you are? From fertility assessments to cutting-edge treatments, Kindbody Milwaukee offers personalized and compassionate care to support your reproductive needs. With over 15 years of experience and countless success stories, Dr. Ellen Hayes believes in providing honest and accurate information, incorporating healthy lifestyle recommendations, and taking a collaborative approach to care with each patient. She and the Kindbody Milwaukee team are dedicated to assisting patients facing fertility challenges and are thrilled to offer the latest technology and techniques within their new state-of-the-art IVF lab in the heart of downtown Milwaukee. To learn more or to schedule a consultation, call 262-518-7448 or visit kindbody.com. I connect so strongly to that, Coral, because that is exactly what happened to me and my husband. Our daughter came along. Before our daughter, we did everything together. We road tripped and we were wrapped around each other on the couch for hours watching movies. He had like endless back rubs from me. And then we had our daughter, and I was like, oh my God, I'm in charge of this vulnerable human life. Like, this is it. I got to focus. And he totally like fell to the wayside for me. And it became about him working and me taking care of the baby. And, that distance grew and we lost track of each other. And the improvement started when we started hanging out separately together and having conversations and getting to know each other again. And it was just through having those conversations, we created more understanding and compassion about where the other person was at and what we needed to do for each other to keep that bond strong and healthy, because we knew what the other person needed. But it was rough. It was really
Right.
rough for years, for a few years at the start. We were like, I don't know, man. I don't know about you.
Right, but that's such a typical scenario. And when you have a child, you are now a whole new person yourself. You are a mother, you are a father, you are a partner still. And so it's real important to get to know each other again. Who are you as a parent? Who are you now as a partner or a spouse? Who are you as an individual? Because we've changed so much. One of the things that I love about being a doula was watching a couple together navigate through the labor process. And it seemed one of my favorite things was just to watch the partner observe the mom in labor and to see a whole new side of her, this strength that he or she has never seen before. And it's like they fell in love with them all over again. Well, the same thing is true when you're a parent now. You're a whole new person, navigating new challenges and new strengths that you're finding. And so if you don't share that with each other and get to re-know each other, then yes, there's a greater chasm between you, a greater division, instead of bringing you together. And again, just focusing on the positives. When my daughter was first born, I worked half a day and my husband worked half a day. So we had this wonderful, unique relationship with our daughter. But I would come home and I'd watch my husband do something with her. I go, oh my God, she doesn't like that. Why are you doing it that way? And instead of just looking at the beauty of those two just having a good time together with each other in their own special, unique way, again, I started off initially to look at that's wrong instead of appreciating how beautiful it was. So it's just look at the glass half full instead of half empty.
I love that. It's like seeing the beauty, in the differences. It's almost like a superpower, right? Of having two different perspectives, two different individuals contributing to this family unit. And I love what you are talking about this seeing the glass half full. I think that the boundary setting, I hope it didn't come across as too, for lack of a better term, aggressive, but more so I think that in that work, it's women go through this incredible vulnerability in pregnancy and delivery and, becoming of a mother. And so I think that there can be so much empowerment in recognizing and advocating for boundary setting within themselves and encouraging their partners to do the same so that the boundaries can be aligned and that we can support one another as partners with the knowledge of what's really important to the other individual. And I just wanted to share, there was about intimacy and kind of like rekindling or re-getting to know your partner is just seeing them as an ally in this journey and recognizing, like we were just saying, the beauty and the differences that they bring. My husband and I'm going to butcher this, but he read a book written by some esteemed psychologist who recommended that when you're anticipating a difficult conversation or some like a challenging situation, you stop and you say to yourself, bring it on. I love pain. Pain sets me free. So I'm sorry, I don't have the person to credit for that. But when things are like, like literally, do I have permission to curse here?
Oh, yes.
Okay, when shit's hitting the fan, and it is just like a complete mess, and you're like, you're waiting for like someone to, like Ashton Kutcher, to pop out and be like, punked. we just look at each other and we say, how much do you love pain? I love pain. And it's just like a simple thing, but both of us, like, immediately it's like, we're lighter. It's like, this is a disaster, but we're here together. And, this is temporary. It's a moment in time.
It's like this having a safety word, except it's a reset
Yeah.
button. Every couple could go into new parenthood and like, let's establish our reset button. What's our safety word?
Gottman calls that a repair attempt. When you're in a discussion and something happens, like you say something that was really hurtful, a repair attempt would be, oh, I'm so sorry. That did not come out right. Let me rephrase that. But just something that is, like you said, it's a cue for you both to just stop for a second because things are getting out of control. I think one of the most valuable things that I've learned, and I wish I had learned it when my kids were growing up, was the timeout. Sometimes you as an adult in any relationship, whether it's with your partner or with your children, if you're starting to find your heart rate is racing and your breathing is heavy and you're just getting a little bit too excited, there's no chance of resolving that communication or even communicating well. You just need a timeout until you can calm down again. So a repair attempt, in his words, is just one of the ways to just like, time, I just need a moment here. And sometimes you have a cue that you both agree on, or something funny. Who knows what it is for each couple.
And what a amazing opportunity too to model that for our kids.
Mm-hmm.
For them to say, wow, I can see that mom is like about to lose it completely. It looks like she needs a quiet moment.
Yes.
Good for her.
Well, that's what it's really boils down to overall, is that if we don't work on our relationship with our partner, what are we modeling to our children? And I think that the best gift we can give them is two parents that have a good, solid relationship that can work on resolving problems together, that can communicate well, that like each other, that enjoy time together.
Yeah, I love what you were talking about, when it comes to the communication, because it's a great thing, or about the repair rather, because it's so valuable for our children to see our humanness. So
Mhm.
the fact that we don't always get it right, that we make mistakes, that we lose it sometimes, that we argue, that we aren't the best version of ourselves 24/7, because we are for sure not. And to then be privy to the next step of what to do when you don't get it right, because as we know, we like a lot of times don't get it right. And so modeling that repair and letting them see, like, wow, I am so sorry, I did not mean to react that way. I love you, we're partners, let's try that again.
And there's a beautiful vulnerability in that, exposing that perfect is not the way of the world, that we can dissolve that illusion of perfection in our relationships and our expectations for life, and be okay being imperfect around your trusted people, and learning how to then move forward and grow and evolve and be better as a person and better together.
Absolutely. I just think that it's important for children to know that we're not perfect, and we know it. And we are a work in progress as well as they are. We're growing and becoming. I think that's just all really great to model for our kids.
Yeah, I think it does take the willingness to enter into that vulnerability with ourselves and ask those intimate questions of ourselves, right? Because we might be going against the default of seeing mistakes as failures as opposed to opportunities to learn and grow.
I agree. And I think one of the worst things we can do is to just be stuck in guilt. Mom guilt is a really awful thing. I've carried it around for so many years. And I finally learned that, yes, at the time I did something, I was doing the best I could with what I had then. And I'm sad that it didn't work out well, but carrying guilt forward forever does absolutely nothing for anybody. But yet we are, especially I believe mothers are more prone to that guilt of I should, I could, and it just doesn't help us.
That's a whole nother huge conversation about the reality of mom guilt and why that is a thing. Because the longer we carry that, the more we internalize it, and it goes deeper and it turns into shame. And then
Yeah.
that's about our whole being.
Yeah, it can be all consuming. There's another quote that I'm again going to butcher by not crediting someone, but I took it off. I didn't want to carry it with me anymore. And I just love that.
So Erica, if you see this with women in your practice, what do you advise them with guilt?
So much of the work that I do is individualized and really feeds off of what the individual person. And so it's hard for me to predict exactly how this would go.
Sure.
But I imagine that I would start by looking directly at this guilt. And part of it is sitting in that feeling to recognize, okay, where do I feel it in my body? How do I know that this guilt is here? Does this experience have a persona, a voice, some association that separates it from who the individual is, right? Because we are not our guilt. We experience guilt, but we are not the same. And so we can choose to separate from that feeling and choose a different perspective. It is sometimes also helpful to acknowledge what the value in the guilt might be. Is there value? What is it? If there was something useful that was coming from this guilt, what would it be? Is it something that I want to hold on to? And then maybe taking a step further to saying, okay, what do I need to let go of or say no to in order to say something, or in order to say yes to what I really want?
I like that. I'm going to turn that around a little bit and apply it.
A difference between guilt and regret. And when you feel guilt about something, I didn't do A, B, or C, is there going to be a situation in the future where I can learn from what I did and apply it a better way? But if it's something that it'll never happen again, I can never go back and change it, there's nothing I can do, that's where you have to just let it go. So I think looking at a situation where you feel guilt, you're looking at your values. What did you do that was going against your values? Why are you feeling guilty? But if you can't change it going forward in a new situation, then let it go. We cannot go back and undo what we've done in the past. That's regret. That's sadness. That's mourning or loss. But why? Guilt is just a terribly unproductive emotion to have. There's no purpose in it. It's just looking at the situation and moving forward and growing from it.
Well, that's good framework. I like that too.
One of your questions was about fatigue and sex and libido. From my perspective, I think, again, it's just about reconnecting in the friendship and reallocating some of our attention and time to our partner so that that can happen, but also just being honest about the fact that I'm absolutely exhausted. So my libido is sort of tanked. But if we work together as a team and I'm not so exhausted all the time, there might be more opportunity for sex. So think about it.
Yeah. I think too, it's so much about the communication, right? And the just acknowledging what's happening so that there's no or there's less concern about, well, whoa, what are they thinking? And, what does this mean for our relationship? And maybe I hope that they don't think that I don't think that they're attractive, etc. It's just, I remember being postpartum the first time. TMI doesn't exist here. So here we go. I just remember, I don't know, I was sitting with the newborn watching some show or whatever. And there was a sex scene. And I was like, I got nothing. There is nothing. I remember watching and being like, good for them. Good for them. And that wasn't for lack of, love or interest in my partner, right? It was just hormonally, girl is not alive.
Intimacy does not have to be sex. And I think, especially in that early postpartum period, there are ways to be intimate with each other. There's ways to connect that doesn't have to necessarily involve sex. Our partners would wish otherwise, but there are other ways to have that intimacy. And I think we begin with that, and that sex is going to return sooner. For me, if my husband just wants to have sex and we haven't been, we haven't connected, we haven't had time together, we haven't talked, I need that emotional connection before I can feel amorous. And so I think postpartum, that it has to you have to connect first, feel some sense of intimacy before you feel that arousal for sex.
Mm-hmm. I think a lot of it has to do with patience too. Patience with ourselves, patience with the relationship, patience with our evolving roles as we're sorting all of this out, and just kind of a trust that, in ourselves and in the relationship, that those parts will come back, that this is a moment in time, however challenging, however unfamiliar.
I think for my husband and I, one of the things that started to bring us back around was, and this is something I'll recommend to the families I support too, is in the mornings as you're starting your days and you're just kind of rushing, one going off this way, one going off that way, that you make sure you make eye contact when saying hello and goodbye. That there could be even just like a gentle touch on the arm. It doesn't have to be grand gestures every time, but taking a moment to say hello and look each other in the eyes and make a gentle touch at the start and the end of the day can sometimes be a good starting point.
Right. And then reconnecting when they come home or you're back together again. And just that, it sounds cliche to say, how was your day? But to really say it and then listen to their response, not just, oh, fine, or rough or stressful, but just to take the amount of time that couples actually spend talking to each other with or without children is abysmally small. It's minutes instead of half an hour or an hour together. So at the end of the day, also just, or when you see each other, to have just that few minutes to reconnect and touch base. How was your day?
It makes such a difference to feel like someone's interested in what you're doing, and then you feel seen.
Yeah.
When we say, like, make sure you're checking in with your person and you help, you prioritize them, like you see them and what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Separate beds, and why not to be afraid of it?
I just think that for couples have worked with over the years, there's a lot of sharing bed with children, and that's all well and good. But I think the opposite is just as equally legitimate, and that is to sleep in separate beds and separate rooms so that people actually get sleep. Sleep is such an important aspect of our health and well-being. And if you're together, like I could never co-sleep because somebody rolls over, I'm awake, and my husband and I often end up in separate beds now just so we get a good night's sleep. So it's not like sleeping in separate beds means there's going to be less sex. If you were co-sleeping with your kids, you're not having it there anyway. I think that we all have to do what works best for us in terms of getting that rest. That's really important. Again, fatigue is detrimental to the relationship.
And there isn't a one size fits all for every couple, for every family. It's being able to discover what works best for you and being honest about it, and knowing that because it's different from what you're told is normal or what you may be comparing yourself to out there, that if it works for you guys and you do feel a stronger bond as a result of it, that it's good.
Right. There's more among the wealthy who can afford it. There's more of houses being built now with his bedroom and her bedroom for that very purpose. People are finding that there's nothing wrong with sleeping in separate bedrooms or separate beds just so that we all have better quality sleep. My grandparents used to sleep apart, and I always thought, oh, what's wrong with them? But then when I would stay over for the night and I'd hear how loud my grandfather snored, I go, okay, I get it. I see why grandma's sleeping in another room. So it's what works for you.
I think too, it's important to remember that that's much like the work that we are doing for ourselves and for our relationship is a practice, right? Things are always evolving. And so if maybe viewing it maybe as an experiment to see, wow, how could this be beneficial for us? Does it work for us? Maybe this is just a moment in time that, like, this is a great time to get more sleep. And you know what? I really miss being in bed with my partner. And so trying that out for a while, but knowing that if you choose to try one thing, it doesn't mean like that is now the rule. This is what we do.
That's right.
Allowing some flexibility and fluidity there.
Yeah. It could be a temporary solution, and that's great. So say that happens for a couple of months, and then you establish a new routine or a new normal that you find works well for your family. I'm going to move us over to the thread question. Are you guys ready?
Sure.
Okay, Coral, can you describe a time in your life you felt totally alive?
I would say that being at this stage of life where I have grown children, I don't have all that stress. There's more balance in my life right now than ever before. So I'm past menopause. I'm past raising children. We're at a place where things are pretty balanced. So for me, there's a lot of those feelings. But when I feel the most alive is when my husband and I are playing together, when we go for a long hike or a bike ride or something outside in nature. And we keep going because he pushes me all the time. We keep going. And I keep thinking, is it almost over? We're going to be there. And he's, oh my God, how long is this going to last? And that moment when we finally arrive at the end and I'm absolutely exhausted, nothing makes me feel more alive than that point of accomplishment and fresh air and sunshine and togetherness, play.
Amazing. Love it. Erica, how about you?
I love that, Coral. Yeah. So one thing comes to mind, and I keep coming back to this memory, is that, and I can't tell you even where I was or what the scenario was, but I was the passenger in a vehicle with my college friends, and it was a sunny day and the windows were open and we were driving with who knows what kind of music, blaring. And I just remember in that moment and to this day being like, this is happiness. This is a moment that I will remember as being when I felt weightless, when I felt aligned with who I am, where I felt like myself. And I keep coming back to that because now as a mom of 2 3/4, I'm like different, evolving version of myself. And I'm still that person. She's not gone. She's not lost. She's buried sometimes. So when I drive with the windows open, I can reconnect in some way with that moment. But I think that there are lots of other things too that make me feel alive in other ways. Like when I'm talking myself off a ledge in the middle of chaos in my kitchen. But I would say that is a memory that, I don't know, it brings me back to myself.
Thank you for that, because you actually reminded me of some similar times in my youth that I remember that feeling. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
Okay, ladies, thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This is so fun.
Well, it's good to see you both. And Erica, good luck.
Thank you.
I hope that it's a quick, easy delivery.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
We'll be in touch. Bye, guys.
Good. Bye.
Thanks for joining us today in the Interwoven space. We invite you to give us a star review and to hit subscribe for a new empowering conversation each week. Visit our website for more of our resources, health guides, podcast episodes, and more at www.interwoven.com. That's interwovxn.com. With this project, we are creating space for women to share their stories. It is not meant to diagnose or treat a medical condition. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified healthcare providers with any questions you may have regarding your health and well-being. Special thanks to Gina Barrington for providing the interwoven music. Until next time.